Games are probably the biggest part of what drives development of computer hardware. If you want to run the latest AAA titles at 4K and ultra settings, you have to invest in your rig pretty much annually. In this video, I'll be putting together a compact gaming PC that may not be enough to run games at 4K, but it won't cost you an arm and a leg. What makes this build interesting is the case. DR Ząber Sentry in white with Star Wars themed DIY decals. If you want to see how I made those, make sure to click on the card in the top right corner. Now let's quickly go over components that I chose for this build. ASRock H110M ITX motherboard, reasonably priced and rock solid. The CPU is good old Skylake Intel Core i5-6500, which will be cooled by Logitech Xenos low profile cooler. RAM is a modest 8 GB of DDR Kingston Fury X. The video card is XFX RX 480 GTR Black Edition with 8 GB of memory on board. Power supply, gold certified semi-passive 500 watts SFXL unit by Silverstone with modular cables. This wasn't the most fortunate choice, which I'll explain later in the video. And last but not least, a white Sentry, a pre-production unit number 13 with a Star Wars twist. CPU and RAM I always install outside the case to make sure that everything isn't dead before proceeding with the assembly. Mounting the Logitech cooler requires access to the CPU socket area from the back of the motherboard, so if you're dealing with Sentry, you must do this step outside the case. Undo 8 screws to take the top cover off. And 4 more to take out the GPU section bracket. First, pop in the motherboard I/O shield. Then, place the motherboard on standoffs and secure it with 4 screws. Next in line is the power supply. Before proceeding with that, I had to remove the fan grill as it was sticking out a little too much, making it impossible to close the top cover. Sentry's manual suggests plugging in the cables before dropping in the power supply inside, but if you forget to do that, you can still connect them without having to take the power supply out of the case. After connecting all cables, it turned out that even with basic configuration, you still have to use almost all of the cables that come with the power supply. Connecting the video card requires fixing a short PCI Express riser, which is secured with 2 Phillips head screws. SSD drive is next, and mounting it required fixing a small bracket. I used a rather small 120 GB SSD that I had lying around, and I use it for operating system only. A nice SCSI target on my Synology server where I store all my games. Connecting the power switch and the power LED is something that should have been done earlier. The last piece of the puzzle is the GPU. The XFX RX 480 takes up pretty much the entire GPU compartment. Combining such large video card with an SFX-L power supply is not the best idea. A smaller SFX PSU leaves some room for the excess of cables that could also be tucked away in the GPU section if it was housing a shorter video card. This issue could also be addressed with custom power supply cables, at least for the graphics card and the SSD drive. After some minor adjustments, I put the GPU compartment bracket in place and replaced the back cover. I fixed the stand onto the case and computer was ready. How do you like it? The whole thing draws 40 watts from the wall when idling and 290 watts under load. In idle, the PSU fan doesn't move at all, which was surprising given the specific construction of Sentry. Logitech cooler does an okay job. The CPU is idling at 35 degrees, and the temperature can rise up to 70 degrees under load. But it is noticeably quieter compared to the Intel stock cooler. The GPU at idle is audible, and the temperature is 36 degrees. Under load it does get louder, but still far from the noise levels of the R9 380X, and it gets as hot as 78 degrees. Performance of the XFX RX 480 will be covered in detail in a separate preview, but here's some benchmarks run at 3440 by 1440 resolution. And that will be all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.